Empathy isn't always love. Sometimes it's guilt in disguise. Sometimes it's the weight that builds inside you until you forget what it feels like to be light. Have you ever felt like your heart doesn't belong to you anymore? Like it became a storage space for other people's grief, anger, fear, and somewhere in the middle of holding everyone else, you lost the parts of yourself no one asked about. That's the quiet agony of the feeler. Not someone who notices pain, someone who absorbs it. The world doesn't see it because you show up, you give, you soften your voice, slow your breathing, fold your body into the safest shape for everyone else to relax around. And in that shape, you vanish. You walk into a room and know, without asking, who's struggling. You can hear it in the silence, feel it in your skin. You sense the lies they believe about themselves before they speak a word. You carry tension in your back that isn't yours. You lose sleep over feelings that didn't start in your own life. And because you do this so well, people come to you, they open up, they break down. And when they leave, they feel lighter. You don't. You feel full of everyone else. Empathy, they say, is a gift, but they never mention the weight. You were praised for your kindness, for being the mature one, the calm one, the rock. But praise is not relief, and strength is not peace. And holding it all together for everyone else doesn't mean you weren't falling apart silently. No one sees the burn marks in the places you've been holding other people's fires. No one asks where you go when you need safety. No one tells the empath you've done enough, because empathy isn't just an ability. It becomes a role, one you didn't audition for, one you're applauded for, one that begins to define your worth. And when that happens, when love becomes labor, you begin to wonder, what am I without this? Without the holding, the fixing, the quiet absorbing? Who are you when you're not a cushion for someone else's fall? You are the feeler, the one who takes in what others release, the mirror that reflects their truth but isn't always allowed to show your own. You wear the invisible crown, but no one sees how heavy it is. Today, that ends. Today, we lift it off, piece by piece, word by word, until what remains is not the burden you've inherited, but the soul you forgot was yours. There's a story you've probably never heard. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a lesson from a textbook. It's a myth whispered in Buddhist temples, about compassion that broke a god. Avalokitesvara was his name, a bodhisattva, an enlightened being who vowed never to rest until every soul was free from suffering. He listened. He opened himself to every cry, every pain, every grief. And one day his head shattered into 11 pieces from the sheer weight of what he felt. His body followed, splintered, broken, not from violence, but from empathy. The gods intervened, gave him new heads to hear more pain and 1,000 arms to try to hold it all. But no one asked what happened in that moment when even a divine heart couldn't carry it anymore. Maybe you've had your own version of that moment. You sat with a friend in crisis. You said the right thing, listened, held space, and when they left, you felt everything they didn't say, and it stayed in you. You stood in a room where nothing was said, but you still left feeling bruised. You walked past a stranger and picked up their sadness like static cling. You've absorbed too much. And somewhere, deep down, you wonder if it's always going to feel like this, and then comes the next story, not divine, not cosmic, just tragic. Oscar Wilde's The Nightingale and the Rose. A boy wants to impress a girl. He needs a red rose. A nightingale hears his longing and decides to help, but no roses bloom, so she sings all night with her chest pressed to a thorn, bleeding her life into the flower. The next day, the boy picks it. The girl shrugs. It doesn't match her dress. He throws it in the gutter and walks away. The nightingale dies. No one notices. You've done this too. You've stayed up all night worrying about someone else. You've stretched your heart thinner than it could bear. You've drained yourself dry, hoping it would help. And sometimes it didn't even matter. Not because people are cruel, but because they didn't see the cost. And maybe it wasn't the grand gestures. Maybe it was the slow erosion, the dozens of quiet sacrifices no one clapped for, no one thanked you for. Because when you give constantly, people forget it is giving. They start to expect it. They don't see the slow burn behind the glow. And then there's the sin eater. Not a metaphor, a real historical role. In Celtic tradition, the sin eater came to funerals. A piece of bread was placed on the chest of the dead. The sin eater would consume it, symbolically absorbing their sins, so the soul could ascend clean. He was paid little, feared, avoided, burdened with everyone's darkness, so they didn't have to face it themselves. That too is the feeler's story. Now you take in what others can't process, their rage, their shame, their despair. You transmute it, but it lives in you. And the worst part, you don't always know it's happening. You just feel tired, heavy, unexplainably sad, until one day you realize you've been holding what isn't yours. So let's be honest now. How much of what you carry was never meant to be carried by you? How many times have you swallowed your needs so someone else could breathe easier? How often have you mistaken this for love? There's a difference between generosity and abandonment of self, and here's what no one tells you. Even empaths need witnesses. Even those who hold must be held. Even lanterns need rest. So if you've been bleeding like the nightingale, breaking like the bodhisattva, or bearing it like the sin eater, pause here. Breathe. You are not weak for feeling too much. You are not broken for needing relief. You are not selfish for wanting to be seen, and you're not alone. You never were. You wake up tired, but not from sleep. You've been carrying things you don't remember picking up. Moods, tensions, emotions that don't even belong to you, and it's not poetic, it's neurological. You're not just emotional, you're wired to merge. Mirror neurons, that's what the scientists call them. Your brain doesn't just understand emotion, it mirrors it. Pain, stress, sadness. It all plays through your nervous system as if it were your own. And when you're wired like this, you don't just sense the storm, you become the storm, and you don't even realize it's not yours. So you take it in, you hold it, you try to fix it, because that's what you were taught makes you kind. But this isn't kindness anymore. It's overfunctioning, it's emotional fusion, it's forgetting where you end and everyone else begins. And it doesn't feel like a grand collapse. It feels like staying too long in rooms that drain you. It feels like being the one who's always okay because there's no time for you not to be. It feels like quietly drowning in everyone else's sorrow while smiling like it's your own joy. You've walked out of conversations feeling hollow. You've left family gatherings with a headache that wasn't physical. You've spent hours alone holding emotions like souvenirs you never meant to bring home. And the worst part, you've normalized it. You've convinced yourself this is what compassion looks like, that this is love, that this is strength, but it's not. It's erosion, and it's not your fault. No one taught you how to feel with people without being consumed by them. No one taught you that empathy needs boundaries, that even oceans need shores to keep them from swallowing the land. So you keep taking it in. You become the mirror, the sponge, the emotional reservoir, and over time you stop knowing what's yours. You say yes when you're empty. You check on others while you're crumbling. You downplay your needs, your sadness, your soul's call for rest. You don't break, you fade, piece by piece, smile by smile, until one day you whisper in the dark, I don't know what I feel anymore. Jung once said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others. But you skipped that step. You ran toward everyone else's grief, to avoid standing still with your own, and now you're exhausted, not from giving, but from disappearing. You are full of feeling, but emptied of self. You are praised for your compassion, but unseen in your collapse. And here's the part no one says out loud. The most dangerous weight is the one that whispers your needs don't matter. That's the lie that keeps the feeler stuck. That's the myth that keeps the healer sick. But now you see it, now you can name it. Now you begin to come back. There comes a point when your gift becomes your prison, when what once made you feel alive now makes you ache, when compassion becomes compulsion and love becomes a pattern of self-erasure you can't stop repeating. Because you don't just want to help, you need to. Because somewhere inside you believe that if you stop, you'll stop being worthy. And that's the feeler's secret fear, that if they stop rescuing, no one will stay. So you become everything for everyone. You show up, you fix, you absorb, and over time you become something else entirely, exhausted. You've skipped meals because a friend needed to vent. You've stayed in conversations long after your soul left the room. You've written paragraphs of comfort while crying silently in your own pain. And when they felt better, you felt hollow, like you disappeared to bring someone else back to life. But that's not empathy, that's martyrdom. And martyrdom isn't love, it's burnout with good PR. Paul Bloom once said, empathy is a poor guide to morality because it's biased, it's selective. It pulls you toward the loudest suffering, not necessarily the deepest. And in relationships, it can blind you to patterns that are quietly destroying you. You tell yourself you're loyal, but really you're scared. You're afraid of what happens when you say no. You're afraid of being seen as selfish. You're afraid of what it means to be you without constantly managing the feelings of others. You've confused love with control. You've confused availability with virtue. You've confused your disappearance with being good. But who taught you that? Who taught you that to matter, you had to vanish? That to be loved, you had to suffer? That to be enough, you had to be empty? It was never supposed to be this way. You don't need to rescue everyone. You don't need to hold the pieces that others keep dropping. You don't need to stay in conversations that wound you just because someone else needs to talk. You are not a lifeboat. You are not a therapist in disguise. You are not the dumping ground for emotions no one else has learned to process. You're a person, and your empathy is not supposed to be a curse. It's supposed to be a bridge, not a burial. And maybe you've walked over that bridge so many times for other people that you forgot you're allowed to cross it for yourself. So here's your permission. Step back, say no, go quiet, let go, let people feel what they need to feel, let them grow, let them struggle, let them take responsibility for their own emotional weather, because every time you pick it up for them, you drop a piece of yourself, and the world needs you whole. You were never meant to burn just to light the way. You were meant to shine steadily, safely, without apology, and the moment you stop bleeding for love is the moment you begin to live. No one tells you what happens after the collapse. Not the public one, the quiet one. The one where you're still showing up, but you're no longer there. You kept saying yes, kept absorbing, kept softening your voice and rearranging your needs to accommodate everyone else's storm. And then one day, you couldn't feel anything. That wasn't weakness, that was overload. You weren't built to carry everything, but you tried. And something sacred in you shattered. And maybe that breaking saved your life, because this is where something begins again. Not a miracle, not a fix, but a small, quiet refusal. You start saying no, not as a rejection, as a reclamation. You start choosing when to give, when to rest, when to walk away from pain that isn't yours. And in that space, in the stillness after survival, a garden begins to grow. Not a lush one, not yet. Just a single shoot breaking through the hardened earth of exhaustion. That shoot, it's called self-worth. There's a line from Rumi that lives like a seed in the body. Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open, through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally. And maybe that's the truth you were never told, that your empathy isn't just something that connects you to others, it's what roots you to yourself. You begin to understand that presence doesn't mean absorption, that care doesn't require collapse, that you can hold space for someone's sorrow without losing the shape of your own soul. You stop answering every message immediately. You stop over-explaining your silence. You stop rushing in just because someone else is unraveling, and for the first time you don't feel guilty, you feel free. This is not selfishness, it's alignment. You begin to feel joy again. Not borrowed joy, not they're okay, so I'm okay joy, your own. You begin to feel peace in your body, not because everyone else is calm, but because you are. You start to say things like, I'm not available for that right now. Or I care deeply, but I can't carry this for you, and the world doesn't fall apart, but the lies you were taught do. Clarissa Pinkola Estes once wrote, ours is not the task of fixing the entire world at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. And sometimes the part of the world within your reach is your own nervous system, your own battered heart, your own depleted soul. So you begin mending it, not all at once, but moment by moment. You stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others. You stop bleeding for people who don't know they're holding a knife. You remember that your softness was never the problem. Your problem was forgetting that it needed protection too. You are still an empath, still a healer, still someone who feels so deeply it sometimes aches, but now you know where to place your roots. Now you grow without shrinking. Now you glow without burning, and that is how the garden begins. You used to think your empathy made you fragile. That feeling too much was your flaw, that the depth of your love was something you had to survive. But now, you know better. You know empathy is a form of sight. It's not just feeling, it's knowing. It's the ability to detect storms in silence, to recognize sorrow in a sentence, to feel the tremble in someone's chest even when they smile. But empathy without direction is a flood. Empathy without boundaries is a fire. And you've lived too long burning for others while forgetting to keep any light for yourself. That's over now. You've stopped apologizing for your space, stopped sacrificing your soul to stay lovable, stopped making your worth dependent on how needed you are. Now you're something different, not less caring, not less open, but wiser. You no longer run into burning buildings just because someone calls your name. You no longer hand out pieces of yourself like spare change. You no longer confuse helping with disappearing. You are still a lantern, but now your flame is contained. Now your light has structure. Now you shine from a place of choice. John O'Donoghue once said, may you learn to see yourself with the same delight, pride, and expectation with which God sees you in every moment. And maybe this is the beginning of that. Maybe now you see yourself not just as a vessel for other people's pain, but as someone who deserves gentleness too, as someone who doesn't have to justify their peace, as someone whose light doesn't have to flicker to prove it's real. You no longer see your sensitivity as a liability. You see it as a compass. You no longer flinch when someone says you're too emotional. You see emotion as language, and you're fluent in it. You still feel everything, but now you know what to keep and what to let pass through. You are still moved by beauty, still softened by kindness, still changed by grief. But you are no longer willing to be undone by it. You are not the sponge. You are not the fixer. You are not the apology for someone else's discomfort. You are the lantern. And now you know how to shine without sacrificing the flame. So if this spoke to something in you, if it named the quiet weight you've been carrying alone, let it be the start of your return. Use the comments, use your voice, tell your truth. You've held space for so many. Let this space hold you, and if someone you love is quietly breaking under the burden of feeling too much, share this with them. Let them know they are not alone. They never were, and neither are you.